Welcome you to our City Commission study session. We ask that you turn off or silence all cell phones. Meetings are televised every day on Channel 2 at 7 p.m. and at midnight, and available for viewing on YouTube. First item on the agenda, Planning and Community Development Review of 2018 International Property Maintenance Code.
Mr. Mayor and Commission, the first three items on tonight are updates of the codes that the city uses in development and in building trades and fire codes. As part of the goal setting process last year, we identified the need in many areas to update our code. In some instances, like property maintenance, the codes that we were using were 30 years old. 1985. Some not as old. In fire, I think we're in 2006 or so. But we identified the need to bring all relevant codes up to current standards. Sometimes not a lot changed, whether it's 10 years or 30 years, but we did an across-the-board update of our codes. There's a lot of coordination involved among departments. It's quite an undertaking. So what we're doing tonight is each department that is updating their code is going to come and give a brief overview of kind of some of the highlights that changed and where they are, and then these will come back to you to adopt. Again, these are primarily internal documents. A lot of these have licensing restrictions as far as posting online and stuff like that. You can't really do that. You have to purchase license because these are proprietary codes, but they'll get into that, each department. So the first one up is Planning and Community Development with our director, Julie Hurley.
Okay, thank you. So as Paul said, this is regarding the 2018 International Property Maintenance Code, and this is going to be replacing the 1985 Uniform Housing Code. And so what we use these for is primarily enforcing property maintenance standards with our code enforcement activities. And looking through the 1985 code that was adopted, it appears that a number of chapters of that code were deleted at the time, or just not adopted. The code wasn't adopted in full. So basically the only parts of that 1985 code that were adopted were the parts that related to specifically to exterior property maintenance code enforcement. So that's what we have been using since that time. In reviewing that against the 2018 International Property Maintenance Code, there's really not a whole lot of difference when it comes to exterior property maintenance. As you might expect, deteriorated structures are deteriorated structures. Trash is trash. It's pretty comparable. Really the changes that we're looking at, we're going to adopt this 2018 code in whole, and so it's going to include a lot of chapters that relate to interior property maintenance standards, and that's something that we don't really enforce right now, and we haven't really had a mechanism to enforce. As you're probably aware, for a lot of tenant-landlord type issues, right now we contract with Sister Vicky, and she handles a lot of that mediation for us. With the new rental property coordinator that will be coming on here within the next few months, the city will be taking that back on. And so when we've gotten involved before, when Sister Vicky has had folks that have needed help, we haven't really had a way to effectively help them because we haven't had an adopted code that we can really enforce anything against. So the hope is that adopting this code that has chapters dealing with things like ventilation and plumbing facilities and mechanical and electrical requirements for inside existing homes, that we'll be able to come up with a good list in ways that we can enforce some issues that might be coming up as we're helping folks with the new rental coordinator position. So just kind of briefly, the structure of the code, I think this is the shortest code of any of them that are being looked at tonight. So the first two chapters are just scope and administration and definitions, pretty basic administrative type stuff. We will be changing a little bit in that first chapter just to kind of bring it in line with our current practices and make sure that it lines up with the way that we operate and there's no conflicts there. The third chapter is general requirements. That's what we primarily use for the code enforcement activities now. Relates to all of the exterior things that we take a look at in our everyday code enforcement. Chapter 4, pretty self-explanatory, light, ventilation, occupancy limitations. Those are again going to be related to things going on inside a house. Chapter 5, plumbing facilities and fixture requirements. That's gonna be looking at things like plumbing systems and fixtures, water systems, sanitary drainage, things that we do encounter sometimes when we go out to help on these, the rental properties. And again, just haven't really had a good way to cite any codes because we haven't had anything adopted that deals with that. Chapter 6 is the mechanical and electrical requirements. Again, that's gonna include things like heating facilities and mechanical equipment. Again, things that we run into sometimes, but we haven't had a real good way to help folks out and enforce anything. Chapter 7, fire safety requirements. A lot of that is already covered in the fire code that you guys are looking at, so this duplicates some of it. But again, just a kind of a good, repeat and something that we'll be able to enforce on and have some standards that we look at when we're taking a look at some of these properties that we may be going into. So that's really the meat of it. If you have any questions, I can answer those for you. I would anticipate that as we get somebody on in the rental coordinator position, with it being a new position, we'll be kind of fleshing out, the duties and responsibilities for the first few months, getting our hands around what that's really going to entail and look like. But I would anticipate that this code would be really useful in coming up with some sort of standards or checklist or just something that we have that's consistent when we're going out and taking a look at properties that we might get called in to assist on.
Would this be kind of consistent with inspections when you have when you're buying a new house and you need an inspection?
This wouldn't be used for that.
No, but I mean, would it be similar, do you
It
think?
might be. I honestly don't know. Private home inspectors have their own list of requirements, and a lot of that depends on what type of financing you might have. Different loan
Right.
types require different things.
Okay.
And so, like Pat Tooley, who manages our Section 8 program, he's got his own list of requirements. There may be some similarities in this, but it would be more along those lines that we'd be looking at.
Okay.
Ms. Hurley, on Chapter 4, Occupancy Limitations, I remember a case we had a few years ago with, there were 8, 10, 12 people in the house, all unrelated, and I think we had something on the books, no more than 2 unrelated families or something like that in under one roof, and the courts threw that out saying we cannot define what a family is anymore. So on occupancy limitations, can you tell me what might be involved there?
So that's really talking about how many people would be allowed per number of bedrooms. And so like how much space would be required for a certain number of people living in a home. That's not gonna say you can only have 3 unrelated people in a home. That's more talking about you need to have these types of facilities provided for these number of people and making sure that there's adequate facilities and space provided for the number of occupants that you might have in a home.
Almost like a building occupancy.
Right.
And that's just for rental property?
This is for any residential.
Well, let's say someone's got a shotgun house, 1 bedroom, 2 bedrooms, kitchen and a bathroom, and they've got 8 kids. So there's 10 people.
That was me growing up.
Yeah. We can't stop that, I mean,
Families,
if that
big
family unit
families.
has, 10 people in that small home, and there's probably cases like that, are we, Big Brother, and go in and say, no, you can't live like that?
No, that's not our what we anticipate doing. And legally, we can't require a private citizen to let us into their home.
Right.
I know there's legal requirements when we can and can't get in, and so that's why we would be looking at mainly with these when we're asked to come out, which is a property owner is not going to ask us to come out and inspect their own home.
Right.
We'd be looking at when we have rental properties and we have a position in place that can go out and take a look at some of these things, and we're invited out by a tenant, that we would have a list of things that we could look at that point. But no, we will not be going around, looking for interior type situations to deal with.
So, and you probably don't know the answer, but let's just suppose that we have the rental coordinator in place, and a tenant calls, says, I have a broken toilet, my landlord's not playing ball with me, I need it fixed. So we go out there and look at it, so we know what the story is. we go out there and it's a small house, and it's a mother, father, and 8 kids in 2 bedrooms. Then are we saying, I'm sorry, you can't live here anymore? Because we're gonna become knowledgeable about that.
Right, and I'm not sure at this point, I'm not sure what the legal requirements or ramifications might be.
Yeah.
I would anticipate that it'd be more of, we'd come up with sort of a checklist, like what Section 8 has, we'd kind of come up with our own checklist, here's the things we're going to look at. And obviously if we're seeing, other life safety issues when we're out there, then we would have to, have some sort of mechanism in place to deal with things that we might encounter. But at this point, I'm not sure what that's gonna look like, but it's certainly not gonna be our intention with this new program to be displacing anybody, who, is just needing to stay in their home and just needs some help with some, basic facilities for them.
And I agree with that. I'm just concerned that the occupancy limitations can, if we have something on the books and we don't enforce it, it's a catch-22.
Sure.
And I'm just concerned about the occupancy limitations.
And
It's
we can
something that
certainly
wanna
take a
be
little bit
involved in.
closer look at that chapter. Any of these sections, we have the ability to modify or exclude certain sections, so I'll certainly flag that for us to take a look at, and if that's something that turns out it may be better to just not have anything in place for that specific issue, then we can certainly do that.
Yeah, I take your recommendation on that. Okay.
For chapter 3, what are requirements for having a swimming pool?
Let's see.
6-foot fence for one.
Do you need a fence?
Yeah, most insurance companies require you to have a fence.
Yeah, there are certain situations, in which you need a fence. Yeah, and it's a pretty short section. It's literally a paragraph that's
Okay.
about the swimming pools. Yeah, off the top of my head, I don't have it. But yeah, if there's a certain depth, then you're required to have a fence.
Okay.
And that is something that is currently covered in our building codes as well, so yeah.
What's the, just general timeline in terms of the hiring process for the rental property coordinator position?
So that position closed on Friday. We had a number of applicants, a pretty high number of applications, and so HR has gone through those and sent up to me all the qualified applicants, so I'm currently in the process of getting through those. I would hope that we could at least make contact with a first round of qualified applicants before Christmas, if not have a first round of interviews before Christmas. December tends to go pretty quick and people are busy, so it may be into January before we start those interviews. But we do have the applications and are hoping to get through those here as quick as we can to get somebody on board.
And will the person selected for this position be a direct report to you?
Yes.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Nope.
Okay,
Not
and
now.
I don't think Paul mentioned our timeline on getting these back. Once we get through tonight, we'll drill down a little bit more, and refine these a little bit, all the departments, and then get the ordinances written up with the city clerk and get those prepared, and get those back to the commission.
Great.
For you to approve.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, we have the fire code. Our chief, Gary Birch, and our fire marshal, Andy Brooks, is also here tonight. Chief?
I didn't bring the 2018 International Fire Code. It's 620-some pages, so I thought we'd go ahead and just read it tonight.
You're not gonna read it for us tonight?
Can you just read it to us?
Yeah.
Just a quick little history. There used to be the Uniform Building Codes, Uniform Fire Codes, what it was called. Some people used NFPA, and throughout the country, it was like 3 different codes in the East and Midwest and stuff. And then in the early 90s, a group was formed, saying, we need to kind of standardize stuff. So an organization was put together called the ICC, International Code Council. And under that, basically, they're now kind of the umbrella that has tied all these codes kind of together. So now it's international building codes, international existing building codes, so they're all kind of tied together. So, and there is some overlap in some of the stuff. So that's kind of where that was formed. When you hear the ICC, it's, in fact, when we were going to switch from to a different code, we go to the ICC to get a code book that tells us the difference and stuff. So everything is kind of tied together now versus individual, and that's where that came about. So the first edition of the International was in 1997. And then every 3 years, it renews, so 97, 2000, 2003, and we're in 2006, so it goes every 3 years. Between those years, there's, sometimes there's some of the codes may have more changes than others, some may be, not all that much, but, we're going from the 06 to the 2018. So we planned on a lot of research and study to try to figure out everything. And so we were going to have to buy like 5 volumes of the ICC telling us, but we're very fortunate to live in this region, under the Mark region, because the Heart of America here, they've all got together a couple years ago and started trying to standardize and make sure everybody's kind of on the same page here. Now each communities, Shawnee, Overland Park, Independence, they may have certain things they don't want to do, but everybody's kind of worked towards getting to the 2018. Some of the cities in our area, and they also talk to builders associations and things of that nature too on board. So a lot of them, several of them in our area, to the 2018. Some have been working on it this year, like we are. And getting into it, there really wasn't a whole lot of stuff. Some of the stuff was already there that we were doing. Just want to touch on a couple things that I don't think, and we already got some stuff in play. For example, standardized the fire department connections on a building. It used to be 2.5-inch couplings. We started a couple years ago with new construction, and when we're dealing now with engineers and architects today, they're already using newer additions and stuff. So we use now the 4-inch Storts connection with the 30-degree turn down. That's actually in this code. Before we would just ask them that's what we'd like, because they ask us what do you want for your connection. So some cities may have a 5-inch, so we started doing that. One of the things too, and this just happened to come up just recently, because it was actually done here in the city, but it's in these codes not to allow it. And actually, there's about 25 or so states that already have banned it in the state, and then that's, I'll call them sky lanterns, Japanese lanterns, things that people light. Some people say it's flying trash, but it's in this code. And just a couple weeks ago, we caught wind that this was going to take place here in the city, and so Andy talked to him, and we discussed at first. It's nothing that we can enforce. We just said, we really would prefer you not to do this, but we can't tell you that you can't. And so it did move locations from where it was at, and I don't know if that's the reason, but it moved down here by the water. I'm thinking, hope for strong wind, but going forward, that may be something that people want to do that we say you can't do. And I tried to looked at the things that people get upset and you're going to hear about. So that's why I want to just kind of touch on those things. A lot of things are insignificant, and it's not going to affect a whole lot. We'll know it's happening, but it won't be anybody upset or stuff. And our thing too on a lot of stuff, especially in the older part of town, if somebody does upset about because we want to require them to have separation or sprinklers, we're not trying to cost them money. I'm not thinking necessarily about where they're at. I'm thinking about that's going to affect everybody down in Delaware, everybody down, so I'm protecting everybody from the safety standpoint. If a person doesn't want to wear their helmet or seatbelt, that's going to affect them. But some of these things is going to affect a lot more people and be a lot more costly to the whole economic in the city versus just one person. So, and that usually comes when someone goes to remodel a home or something. But anyway, in the big thing really in the 2018 is Chapter 11, and we're actually going to recommending that we omit Chapter 11 with 2 exceptions. Chapter 11 basically is existing buildings, and basically, in a nutshell, it's that when this is adopted, everybody comes up to code. A couple cities I've talked to is their council, they opted out. There is a couple here that Andy's been talking to that chose not to opt out of that. I'm going to talk to the fire chief later. I just can't believe that's going to go through. But basically, it says, and I think even Paul, didn't someone call you once? Because you asked me if we would come back later and want someone to do something. I think maybe they had passed that, so I can't see that. What we're more into is if the occupancy changes, or they're going to do a renovation or some of that nature. And a lot of this will fall under the building code. That Hal's the expert on all this back there. So that's one thing. So we opted out of that. But the 2 things that we wanted we did, one in there is sprinklers and CO detectors. Now the smoke detector we've already had, but it talks about you don't have to go in and have them all hardwired together. unless they do a remodel and tear all the sheetrock off and stuff of that nature. Then we want them hardwired together. The CO detectors is for any place where there's not individual residents, but multiple people, and there's anything that's, a fireplace, a gas stove, gas heater, something of that nature. The code requires that you should have a CO detector, and that's for protection of people. So that part we're just going to leave in there. So that's on the code side. The other thing that I'm proposing is that we basically go with a no burn in the city, no burning in the city limits, except for open pit air destructor, which that's a commercial thing. In fact, when they're clearing all the brush up there on 20th and Eisenhower, they came in, wanted a permit, we went and looked at it. And it's more of a commercial when they're clearing off area, and it's kind of down the ground, and it has air pumping into it, so you don't get any smoke. Very once in a while we'd see a little light smoke, so it's just pumping air into it, so it's burning, and that's for big construction type projects, so we allow that. The other thing that we're proposing is we go ahead and allow people to do ceremonial bonfires, and our thing is it's got to be 50, and that's permit also. It has
Right.
cost. It has to be 50 feet from the structure. It has to be someone on site the whole time. It can only be 6 foot in diameter, 4 foot high. They have to have some form of extinguishment, whether it be a garden hose, a bucket of sand, things of that nature on site, and it has to have some type of a ring around it. It could be rock, stone, or something of that nature. And of course, the wind stipulations and things of that. So open pit destructors, ceremonial bonfires, and I say ceremonial bonfires because sometimes schools or colleges will want to do something of that nature, bonfire. The other thing is prescribed burns, and what that would be is some people might have, I'm just things I've experienced before, may have prairie grass that they have, and or we might want to burn off an area where there's a retention pond or something of that nature. So that's what that prescribed thing would be, which we require a permit for that. It also says in there on someone's got prairie grass and stuff, they should have someone that's kind of trained in doing that to burn that off. And it probably wouldn't be something that we would probably go stand by for it too. And I've been in the past asked people if we could stand by when they did that. And that just doesn't happen all that often. And then a recreational / campfire. So it's stipulation 25 feet from the structure, 3 foot in diameter, no more than 2 foot high. And kind of the same thing, it has to have a ring around it or some stones or block. And that's for like cooking marshmallows or something of that nature. Then you have to have should have some type of extinguishment, garden hose, bucket of water, things of that too.
No permit required for that.
No permit. And then also, and actually, the portable outdoor chimneys that you can buy now, those came into play some time now, but that wasn't actually, I don't think that got in about the 2015 code, because something people come out with, and a lot of cities that had no burning, then people had these little fireplaces. So that's in there too, no permit on that. That could be the 15 feet from a structure, same thing. We'd like to see something, a bucket of water or garden hose or something close by. And one reason I even got to think about this, now people will call in the mornings during the day and ask for a permit. And so my battalion chief goes out there and looks, and someone's been collecting some tree branches and stuff all winter, and they want to burn it. So it's about the size of and we have people same people, a lot of them do it every year. But then also, I've got a call before from one of the other directors that, can people burn leaves here? People burning leaves in the street. In the January of 18 and twice this year, we've had 3 structure fires. One actually was one of our residents that's actually on the other side of Eisenhower, and then we've had a couple around here. 2 of them, they were burning which we allow, burning in a barrel, like a 55-gallon barrel. A little windy stuff got going and actually caught the structure on fire. And the one on Eisenhower was actually his barn. And then the other one was they were burning a tree stump, too windy, and we get the call, it's already up on the house. It's pretty good. So things do get away from you sometimes. The other thing that I thought about here, because I've questioned a lot of people who's been around for a while in the fire department, and they said, you got people that just like doing that and all. But then we got the people out there that burning, and then it gets away from them too. But then also I said, yeah, but that's true. But also here in our community, you can bundle stuff up and tie it up, and our refuge will pick it up.
Pick it up.
That doesn't happen in a lot of cities.
That's a good point.
The other thing is that we have a brush dump over here, so residents from Tuesday to Saturday can take their stuff over there
points.
at no charge. So that's two pluses that many communities don't have. And so it just, my recommendation, just for safety factors, to go basically no burning with the exceptions so they can do the, and the reason why the campfire, recreational fire, some people may not be able to afford to buy one of them little chimney. Them things are kind of expensive. But if they have 3x3, 25 feet out, a ring around it, you know, feel comfortable with that, and, you know, to roast marshmallows or cook hot dogs or something.
If they don't have to get a permit, though, how would they be aware of the, the criteria for that type of fire?
Well, we get a lot of phone calls. We get phone calls now from people saying, hey, can you burn here?
Yeah.
Because maybe they've moved here from somewhere else and they see their neighbor burning.
Yeah.
Now, with any kind of burning, if it becomes smoking or something, we can go put it out because there's a nuisance thing. It can't be a nuisance too. We put something out the other day because it was real windy and there was a big pile of leaves and Chief Fury happened to go by, so we had a unit come over. And we've also added something here where we try to identify what you can burn. Tree branches. In other words, if it's a 2x4, that's a no-no, but tree branches, firewood. But we've been places where they're burning leaves. Well, it says tree branches, firewood. Well, leaf is part of a tree. It's not worded real good. We've actually had people burning paper. Well, where do you think paper comes from? Chief, it comes from a tree. So we actually pulled the definition out, and actually we kind of drew that from Olathe. Looked at Olathe and kind of got that. So this would all be in the city code, and the city code, when on the ordinance is what gives us the authority to use this code. Right. And this would be put into our city ordinance, and so it's going to be spelled out. Also, it's something that we put this on our website. We'll have it on our website, the fire department, city website. We have flyers made up now for kind of what people are doing. So we just try to get the word out. And like I said, a lot of people already don't burn anyway. We've had a few where we called out people maybe got a little fire going, on the lot, and then we find out they don't even own the lot, so we have some of those too. So
I've seen that.
there'll be a few people maybe upset, but I think a lot of people aren't aware of having be on a burn anyway. But like I said, with having
You've got enough exceptions, I think.
in having the refuge picking up bundles up and then the free, that's why I kind of feel about that.
Okay.
Just for
that's good.
clarification, Chief, a burn barrel, person has a 55-gallon barrel, you're saying no now.
Well, today they can with the screen on it,
Yeah.
but it would be no.
But your recommendation that we.
Right.
Okay, I understand.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chief.
Good run.
Before you go, this time of year, people have a lot of fireplaces and things like that. Is it true that you still have smoke detectors
We do.
free for people
Yes.
to put in?
Yes.
And that you would help them even if they
Oh,
needed it?
we actually with the grant, we got we didn't buy them, we got them through a grant.
Right.
And we're actually supposed to go install one.
Okay,
Yeah.
I think that's important for the public to realize. And what about carbon monoxide? They would have to purchase those separately, correct?
Yeah, we don't have any of those.
Okay.
Yeah,
But it's good for the public to know that they can get help putting in the
absolutely.
detectors.
And that's
Smoke
for people that own their property. But if it's a
Right,
rental.
if it's rental, that's
Now,
not
we
true.
have, because I don't like to see anybody go to bed at night, but then we get a hold of that landlord and
Okay,
have a chat with them, but yeah.
okay, I think that's good information for right now.
Yeah, and we try to really keep that out there, and it's on the website and stuff. And I don't know the number offhand, but we get calls still, we go do that. So, yeah,
Is it a federal or state grant or some other type of fire
No,
association grant, or?
it is, and then we have it through the State Fire Marshal's office out of Topeka. We got some from there, and then we got some from the Red Cross also.
Is this something
to
you've been doing for a
Oh,
number of
yeah,
years?
number of years, yeah.
Okay,
And then also
good.
the Heart of America Fire Chiefs gets money and
Okay.
grants that way.
Good.
Thanks, Chief.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next will be Hal Burdette, our Chief Building Inspector, Mike McDonald, our Public Works Director, Mike Cooper, our Deputy Public Works Director, and they have a number of codes. I'll turn it over to Hal.
Yeah.
Good evening.
Good evening.
As Paul says, our department's responsible for 8 codes. We currently have 6, but because we're adopting one that we've never used before, which would be the existing building code. And ICC has taken swimming pool and spa out of the other codes and created its own document, so that's the reason why it's a code now. It was addressed previously, but again. So I do want to start with thanking the chief for giving you guys the history of ICC, so I don't have to do anything like that. My department has various boards of appeal, and we did have meetings with the boards to discuss the significant changes to these codes and to go over any local amendments that we have had in the past or proposed for the future. And with the 8 codes, I'll just start with the building code. The building code is exactly what it is. This is for commercial and multifamily uses. Too many changes from 06 to 18 to go over in all these codes, but some of the significant ones are, it's not actually a change to the code, but the change to our operations or our city standards is the city of Leavenworth for years has required a frost depth of 30 inches. Everyone else in this region of the country uses 36. I spoke with the building board. They're comfortable going with 36 because that's what the majority of people are doing in town anyway.
What is it, a?
Frost depth. It means how far your footings have to be below grade.
Cross, I thought you
Yeah.
said cross step, okay, I understand.
Another, one of the significant changes in the code has tables and graphs and everything. We used to be in a wind region of 90 miles per hour. That's no longer allowed by code. We are still in the lowest category, but we are going from 90 to 115 miles an hour. This will come up a little bit later when we talk residential code, but there are requirements now for storm shelters in educational buildings and critical response facilities, fire, police, 911 centers. I can tell you that even though we're still on the 06 codes, portion of the addition at Warren Middle is designed as a storm shelter. So they've already addressed that.
And Henry Leavenworth has a safe room, or
I
a
believe they
F5
do.
room, I think.
Yes.
Is it not, Henry Leavenworth? The grade school by the station number 1? I'm thinking they did.
They have some kind of storm.
Yeah, I think it was rated for an F5.
And then the last thing I want to point out, in conjunction with the chief and the fire code, there's numerous changes related to fire protection, life safety, sprinkler requirements. The building codes nowadays are much more interested in getting sprinkler systems in them than back when we were under the uniform codes. The next code, unless you guys have questions, if you want to get, we'll just jump to the residential code. The residential code is a unique code because it not only covers the building or design aspects of a single family or duplex, this code also contains all electrical, mechanical, and plumbing requirements as well. So it's kind of like a combination of all these codes, but it only addresses for these single family duplexes and townhomes. So when we're out in the field, all answers come from this one book. And it really is good for us and the contractors. So the significant changes in the IRC, well, there was a change that requires sprinklers in single family and duplexes, but the state of Kansas tells us we cannot do that, so we will be removing that requirement from this code when we adopt it. We are leaving it in place for townhomes.
Okay.
Townhomes are, if you all don't know, townhomes very similar to a duplex, other than there's a defined a 2-hour separation wall, and then that property can be owned by separate entities. So that's why the code kind of draws a line there.
Does anybody know why the state doesn't allow the cities to
No, but
enforce the
it's been in-
2018 code?
I do not know why, but it's been in place ever since ICC started requiring sprinklers in residential structures, was it 09 or 12? But as soon as that came out, the state, and many states have done the same thing. They go out and say, you cannot enforce this in single family and duplex.
Because of the cost of, adding those type of features? But
Building
man,
trade.
that's
Yeah.
yeah, the building trades lobby.
Yeah.
Wow, okay.
Chief Birch also mentioned carbon monoxide detectors. I had that in mind in here as well. New construction, renovations, as he said, anytime that there's a fuel burning appliance in a structure or the structure has an attached garage that has an opening that goes into the house, the code will now require carbon monoxide detectors. They will not be everywhere that smoke detectors are, but they will be interconnected with the smoke detectors so that if there's an issue, the alarm will sound throughout the structure, which I really think is a good addition to the codes.
And some, that's for new construction and some renovations in addition?
Major renovations.
Major.
Actually, I'm kind of jumping ahead, but the International Residential Code has an appendix which is existing buildings, and it deals only with issues related to single-family and duplexes again. And it defines when we can require carbon monoxide detectors, and it also defines at what level do we require them all to be interconnected. Interconnected means if the one in the upstairs bedroom goes off, every other one in the house goes
Sure,
off.
sure.
I can tell you there's great technology out there nowadays where they do not have to be hardwired to be interconnected. They have,
Just wireless?
Yes.
Wireless, yeah.
and the last thing I wanted to point out, a significant change in residential is ice barriers and required on when you're new roofs or when you're re-roofing a house. In '06, the city did not make that a requirement, but I have learned over time that it is something that's needed in this area. It's just it's a thicker membrane to protect, and we've all seen in winter months where the ice builds up at the bottom of your roof, maybe your gutters or sometimes even.
Yeah.
This is just protecting that structure from getting damage from that ice that builds up. So we do recommend that we make that a requirement now. My staff has been telling people for years, it's not a requirement, but it's highly recommended.
So that would be when a new roof goes in, even if it's a
Yes.
home that's been around for 10 or
Yep.
15 or 20 years.
There are a couple significant issues that I held out separately that I wanted to discuss with you all. In building code, we said storm shelters. The residential code mentions storm shelters as well. But the IRC does not make it a requirement. The IRC only tells you if you're going to build a storm shelter, then it has to meet this certain standard, which is another code book that we have purchased, but we don't have to adopt it. I can tell you that some communities have gone ahead and made modifications to make it a requirement for single-family structures. I believe it's,
But they're in the minority, would they be?
Structures that don't have.
yeah, the only two that I
basements,
found,
right?
excuse me.
That don't have basements or?
Well, that's where, the city of Lenexa just said that any residential or institutional occupancy, which is kind of bleeding back into the building code, will require a storm shelter. When we say residential, we're talking single family, we're talking hotels, apartment buildings. They say, you build it, you're putting a storm shelter in. The city of Olathe kind of said the same thing, except they give an exception if you have a basement.
Okay, that makes sense.
So I wanted to get your all's, get that out. We have time to discuss this one further if we need to, because like I said, right now, the code just tells us that if you're gonna build one, here's how you build it. And if the commission's interested in beefing up those regulations, we can always bring that back at a later date.
I know if you go to the Parade of Homes down in the Kansas City area, we stopped in some in Lenexa over the weekend. Each one of those houses does have a storm shelter. And it's not that complex, in my opinion. It's a reinforced concrete area within the basement, a lot of times below grade, but not necessarily. And for new construction, on brand new construction, I could see the requirement for it. I don't think it necessarily adds that much cost. I don't know. I shouldn't say that. I'm not a builder. But I'm thinking some of those townhomes out in the new subdivision off New Lawrence Road, in their basements, do they not have a safe room, lack of a better term, a tornado shelter?
You mean,
West Glen?
Those townhouses, yeah,
The
yeah,
new ones.
West Glen.
well, no, I don't think that most of them have what we would consider even
Okay.
close to a storm shelter.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll have basements, and if we bring this issue back, we'll have to redefine the definition of basement, because the building code has a very complicated definition
sure.
of basement. So,
What I saw, and, you know, it takes somebody like you to evaluate it better, just saw some this past weekend, is down usually on the lower floor, which I would call a basement, most of us would call a basement. Back in the utility room, looked like an extra
Yeah.
concrete wall or something there, that,
and we do see it occasionally. A lot of times people will build it in, like if they're having that front stoop,
Yeah,
Yeah.
I've heard that,
they'll
yeah.
work it in there.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
I think it's fair to say if the commission wanted a higher standard, right now, we're saying, you're free to build one, it should look like this.
Well, that makes sense.
If you want to pursue
I don't think it should
some
be
level of
required
requirement, we need to
if you have a
study it
basement.
a little bit further, bring it back rather
Yeah.
than
Now, if it's
sort
on a
of-
slab, that's a different thing, but if you got a basement, I don't see any reason to make it overburdensome for people.
Yeah, we could definitely, I could work towards, looking at some of these, other communities and see how they wrote it up and bring it back to you at a later date for those issues. I mean, I agree, if there was a basement, but like I said,
Yeah.
we need to do a little fine tuning.
Okay.
And I have not spent a ton of time in, this is called ICC 500, which is the storm shelter code.
if it doesn't have a basement, to your point, like on a slab, like in Lenex, most houses there do have a basement or a lower floor, but if it is on a slab, I think they just have like a closet or maybe a bathroom that has reinforced walls. You know, I mean, I'm not looking at adding $10,000-$15,000 to the value, you know, to the construction of a house, but, you know, something that, in case of a tornado or some type of, you know, tornado in our case, that they have a small place they can go for the 10 minutes until that thing passes.
And keep in mind, we don't see a lot of slab on grade, but we
Yeah.
do see a lot of split entries, and a
Right.
split entry would never meet the code's definition of a basement.
Right. But,
Okay.
you know, they could,
Wouldn't you agree,
yeah,
Mike?
yeah, when you get into.
Correct, yeah.
Yeah, it's a
Looks
lot
like
of
a basement,
wordsmithing
but
going on, and,
it's
yeah,
defined.
it's,
Okay.
but some type of reinforced room, I don't.
So we will definitely do some work looking into that. The other chapter that I wanted to bring, to your attention is, chapter 11, energy efficiency. To be honest, currently, the 06 code that we're on has energy efficiency requirements in them, but they're pretty basic, and our department has not been very forceful. You know, we expect to see installation, and we do all inspections before, but we don't do inspections after installation. The 2018 code has significant changes in this chapter, and every community that I've reviewed that has adopted the 2018 code has made significant changes to this chapter. I am not ready to present changes to you yet, because again, I feel like I need a little more time on that chapter. I will tell you that some communities have gone as simple as saying, you're gonna have to give us R30 in the ceilings, R13 in the walls, and that's it. Other communities kept most of these requirements in place, and I mean, it gets to the point where you're doing testing on the structure to make sure it's not losing too much air volume, or you hire a third party to come in and do the acronym is HERS, Home Energy Review, and these communities will not issue a certificate of occupancy until someone has come in and certified to meet these standards. So again, I want to spend a little more, energy efficiency is important. It's important to everyone, it's important to the future homeowners, it's important to us all, but
Sure.
we need a little more time on that chapter as well.
I don't want to interject too much, but I think Hal made a really key point there. Some of what this does makes your housing stock more attractive for future growth. You know, what standards did you have in place? Does every homeowner say what codes were followed in the building of this house? But some do, and that's why we've, you know, in another area, we've upgraded some of the subdivision standards, or looking to on pavement depth. I mean, just sort of increasing, you know, our standards and what people can expect when they, you know, some people move into Leavenworth. So that's kind of some of the idea behind a lot of this.
Well, it's an
And
aspect
I
of,
understand that on new homes, but is this included in remodels as well? Major remodels?
There's the back of chapter 11, again, gives you definitions or parameters. A room addition would require it, but it doesn't say you have to go back and
the rest of
modify
the
the
house.
existing house.
So if you're, you know, with our historic houses and that sort of thing, I mean, it would just be impossible to meet some of those energy standards, obviously.
And depending on the scope of the project, a lot of times this will not come into play for renovations.
Okay.
Now,
Just
if you
curious
go
about
in
that.
And completely gut the entire house and just keep the framing, then some of this would come back into play.
Okay.
The last point on these two items, storm shelters and energy efficiency, Mike and I have discussed it. I do have the Board of Appeals, not all the board members showed up. These are issues that I think we specifically would suggest that we take the time and meet with some of the new home builders
Yeah.
and get
makes
some
sense.
feedback from them as well on these two issues.
Don't want to make it so that they can't
Oh, wait,
work.
we want their input, but, you know,
yeah,
we want to give them kind of heads up of where we're going at the same time.
right.
All right, we'll move on to the existing building code. This is one that, I would call it, it's a new code because we've never adopted it before, but staff has been using this document for years. But the existing building code deals again with commercial properties. You know, anything that's more than a single family or duplex kind of falls under the category of for renovations of the existing building code. It provides three basic different methods of meeting compliance. It gives you credit for existing issues within structures, you know. You don't always have to have an occupancy separation if there's plaster and lath in place. They count that as a, you know, viable occupancy separation. It will sometimes require, as the chief mentioned, sprinklers in some buildings if it doesn't meet the criteria. But I don't even know how to really define this to you. Let me go back a little bit. Of the three methods, there is, we call it the prescriptive method. And basically, the prescriptive method says, anything you do in this building, you're gonna bring it up to code, except with a few minor exceptions about seismic considerations or structural considerations. The second way is what they call work area compliance. Work area compliance, it basically breaks it down into three levels of renovations. We call, you know, alteration, renovation, and I forget, remodeling. For each one of these, as the scope of the project gets larger, the requirements to bring it up to code get a little bit more stricter. If you're going, I don't want to use the example, if you're just going in and repainting, obviously we don't require permits for that. But if you're doing minor alterations, just as long as you use the same materials that were previously used, you're gonna be okay. If you start doing a change in use, as the chief was talking, we take a downtown building and we take an upstairs that has been vacant for a couple of years or more, and then you want to put residential occupancies or apartments up there. More than likely, the way this code is written, you're going to have to put sprinklers upstairs. But it really is a good document, and it's well known within the construction industry. Again, people have been using it in our community for years. We've accepted it as an alternate method of design, but we feel it's now time to put it on the books to utilize here. Do you have any more on it?
Do we talk about reclassifying?
Oh, yeah, when I
Yeah,
mentioned 2
that's what
years
I wanted
ago.
to talk about, because that's what I read at home I wanted to ask about, so.
We have many downtown buildings that, right now, our current policy is if you can prove what the last use was, we will let you, then we decide if it's a change in occupancy or not. If you can prove that it was residential and you're going back to residential, then we would apply the code differently than if it was commercial, now going to residential. But there are so many downtown buildings that have been vacant upstairs for multiple years.
Decades.
Yeah, that we are suggesting that we add a section into the code that says that if it's been unoccupied for 24 months or longer, we're going to classify it as an S2 occupancy, which is a low storage occupancy by the building code. And any changes you make, we are now going to use the existing building code to go from an S to whatever the new
Okay, so
occupancy
you're
is.
bringing down the building code a little bit so that if it's just used for storage and not used for residential or business. Okay.
And we've worked through several projects in the downtown with different owners, have different visions for their building. And I think this clarifies how we're going to approach the discussion, at least where we're going to start with.
So that if they change their usage, then you would go to a different code.
And you end up.
Well, a different section in the existing building code.
Right.
You end up with weird things like scooters, whatever the nightclub was, that was all apartments. I can show you that in the books.
Says scooters.
At one point it
Six
was.
in Cherokee.
Yeah.
Long before it became,
Club Venom.
Oh,
Before,
okay,
before
okay.
it came. I think that's what we're talking about.
yes.
Yeah, I got you.
Apartments,
Yeah.
Yeah, that was all apartments. It hasn't been
Pretty
for
much every
decades.
building downtown was
Yeah.
residential upstairs at one point.
Some are owner
Like the
occupied.
Pullman place that
Well, yeah, short-term rentals.
upstairs, little tiny rooms. Yeah, at one time. I think it was a bordello or something, yeah.
Yeah.
So word for it, yeah.
So we think this will give us a good place. The property owners know where the discussion on what they want to do will start
Okay.
without having really disproportionate expectations.
Okay, thank you for
And
clarifying
I
that.
have kind of written a section to add to the code already, and it does give us the discretion, or it gives the building official a discretion to assign another occupancy besides S2 if the conditions are appropriate for that.
Okay, that's good. It'll make it more flexible.
We'll move on to the electrical code. The electrical code, it's the one document that's not produced by the International Code Council. It's produced by the NFPA. I didn't outline this, but basically this is going to be a long ordinance because we have no administrative provisions in the National Electrical Code, so we're rewriting an entire chapter so that it meets with all of our other requirements. But some of the key changes that affect the average citizen, and this will apply to the National Electrical Code as well as the International Residential Code, these items that I'm bringing forward. We all know what ground faults are, low receptacles, or the code is now requiring them or equipment and other locations to have ground fault protection that we have not seen before. Dishwashers will be ground fault protected. The code actually states that refrigerators and freezers and unfinished basements or garages should be ground fault protected. My staff and I spoke with our electrical board of appeals, and that is not how it's been done for years. The philosophy is that newer refrigeration equipment does not cause nuisance trips on ground faults. My concern is that not everybody has new
Right.
refrigeration equipment, so we are recommending that we go back to the previous requirements and give exceptions for such things as refrigerators, freezers, sump pumps in those areas. It's in line with what we do now, so we're comfortable with that if the commission is.
It's particularly important because a lot of these are in the basement,
Yeah.
and you may not know that your freezer has turned itself off.
Yes.
Or the same.
But
You'll find out, but.
we've had those calls many times over the years.
Yeah, that wouldn't be good.
No, because you don't know that ground fault tripped until 2 weeks after it tripped, and you go down to get something out of your freezer and everything is ruined.
Okay.
Another key change, the homeowners won't really see this change, but it's arc fault protection. Arc fault is the technology nowadays. It's much like a ground fault, but it detects arcs within the circuit itself. And so it will trip a circuit if the device triggers that there's some type of arcing going on within that circuit. I can't tell you, it's a great safety device. They've been around for a few years. I mean, I see no
Most
problems with those.
Most people don't have that, right?
No, they do not. I can tell you some of the electricians I talked to said that they actually recommend them when they go into the older homes, especially with knob and tube. The electricians recommend that the people put those in at that point because it gives them that little bit of added protection. We did
Okay.
discuss what we were going to do on service changeouts with the boards, and we felt that unless a situation such as knob and tube wiring's in place, we were not going to require, because the code does not require arc faults when you change out a service.
Okay,
And
so-
we were gonna stay in line with that, but all new construction would be covered by this.
So if you added on like a new circuit board because of, you wanted more computers and stuff, more outlets, then they would include that at that time, put that in at that time?
Well, no, if they added new circuits, the new circuits would have arc fault protection.
have them
But if
already.
you're just changing out the service panel, no.
No, okay.
And the code actually breaks us out, and it tells us again, these codes try and cover every scenario. They'll tell you, if you're just changing, minor changes, this doesn't come into play.
Okay.
But once you reach a certain level, then arc fault will come into play.
Okay.
And the last one, which I have outlined, is tamper-resistant receptacles. I don't know if you all are familiar with these, if you've seen them. It looks like a standard receptacle, but there's a little plastic cover inside of the device that basically you cannot plug something into it. The only way to plug something into it is with both leads of the cord make contact at the same time. It's a beefed up version of the old child protective caps.
Only it's on the inside.
It's on the inside.
I never seen it.
Yeah.
And it is currently required in all of our multifamily structures, but the IRC has made the change that it's now required in single family and duplexes.
All the new lofts have that, right, Hal?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
I can tell you that the reason I wanted to bring this one forward is, no offense to my electrical board of appeals, they were of the opinion that we should not make this a requirement. And I know they are, a little awkward sometimes to plug a device in, but my thought is you move into a new home, besides, your vacuum cleaner or maybe some other appliance, how often are people plugging something in? You set down the TV and you plug it in, you fight that, it takes a second longer to get it plugged in that first time, and then you're not gonna deal with it again. I'll support whatever the commission wants to do on this issue, but it's a safety factor that, like I said, I just thought I'd bring to your attention that we kind of got a difference of opinion between staff and the boards on this one.
So if you pass this would be a requirement on every new
It would be new construction or any
Significant
renovation.
or renovation?
yeah.
Okay.
Mike Cooper brought up a good point when we were discussing this, that it'll be interesting to see how the home inspectors, as you were talking with Julie earlier, because the home inspectors don't follow the same guidelines that
Right.
we do.
Right.
If something was legally installed 30 years ago and it's still in working order, our department doesn't have anything to say about that. But the home inspectors, they come in and they require ground
Yeah.
faults everywhere that the current codes require. We only require them if you do work in that area. So it'd be interesting to see which direction the industry goes on tamper-resistant receptacles in existing homes. But like I said, I'll take the commission's lead if you want to keep it in place or remove that.
What do the electricians think?
The electricians, like I said,
Yeah.
two electricians showed up to our electrical board, and they were both of the belief that they thought it was troublesome, and they recommended we not do it.
I think it's a
I would be
safety.
more likely to go along with the electricians, what they,
No, I think it's a safety, we're not talking
can-
great cost, are we? I
You
mean,
know,
for a new,
I'm,
for,
it's,
we can't provide safety for everybody.
no, I'm just
You
saying, I
can't
think it's
be cradle to
relatively.
grave.
it's probably,
Provide.
it might be $1 more a device. But
Okay.
I can tell you that, I used several communities that, you know, I've been reviewing what they have done, especially the ones that have updated to the 2018 codes. I've not found a community that have taken this requirement out.
They left it in.
They've left it
Yes.
in.
And the example you use, yeah, I hadn't thought of it before, yeah, it's a pain to plug it in. But you're right, unless you're toting around your vacuum cleaner, you know, how often do you use an electrical outlet? I mean, you do plug in your
Every time
TV,
you
you plug
vacuum
in
the
your
floor.
charging things, you plug in your lamps, and,
Every time
you know,
yeah,
that's,
hair dryer, plug in,
and that's all, and it's, you know, plugged in once and you don't touch it again for
Unplug
another
your,
Strips are.
2-3 years
Toasters.
until your
Stick a knife
wife
down in
decides to rearrange the living room or something, and,
And this doesn't impact power strips.
I think this is a good,
Right.
good idea.
So we'll see it again.
Larry should be here, I know what he would say.
Leave it alone.
Well, I think he'd
Kind of
say
way
for
I
a
feel.
dollar, I think he'd say for $1, I think he'd be for it. Can't speak for him. Larry, if you're
Can't
watching,
speak for
call in.
We can't speak for him.
All right, we'll move on. Next on the list is fuel, gas, and mechanical codes. These are codes that are already in place, and staff did not find any significant changes in these two codes. The plumbing code, there are a couple changes that we thought was important to point out. Inspections, which we actually like this, both of these, inspections being required when major renovations of plumbing systems are being made. I don't think I completed this sentence well enough for you, and I apologize. This is inspections of plumbing that is under slab. So
Oh,
what the
okay.
code says is that anytime everything above slab is being replaced, we can require that they go in with cameras and prove that everything under the slab is in reasonably good shape and still, you know, adequate for use. We don't see this happening a lot, but I think it's a really good mechanism to have in place. I mean, how often do we see I can't remember last time we saw a plumbing system stripped down to the slab.
Yeah.
But it can also require it in certain instances on the building sewer.
Yeah.
And as we all know, a lot of new home purchase or home sales now, people have the sewers cameraed anyway. The technology is very common and very much available. The other one that the plumbing board pointed out, or actually a mechanical board, because saddle type fittings are no longer allowed, and the saddle fitting is that clamp that you see where they just clamp it around a piece of pipe and then they
Oh, yeah. Screw
and then
it
they screw it into the pipe, and a lot of times you'll see it used on humidifiers. Sometimes you'll see it on,
Ice makers.
yes, an ice maker for a refrigerator. The code now says those valves are no longer allowed, and the reason are because they clog up all the time. The plumbing board was happy to see this requirement go away. The mechanical board's like, what are we gonna do when we put in a new humidifier? We tell them, you know, we already allow the each trade to have a little leadway when they're on a project. My staff and I are more than comfortable if a mechanical contractor goes out and adds a humidifier. There are other ways to supply water to that humidifier. We would not require they get a plumbing contractor to come out and do that work for them, just so long as we got to see the work.
Okay.
I did want to mention that also in the plumbing, the issue of thermal expansion control. Currently, the 06 residential and plumbing code require expansion tanks, let's call them expansion tanks, in situations when you have pressure reducing valves or backflow preventers. The city of Leavenworth has never forcefully enforced this section. I believe it is time. I spoke with the plumbing board. We had 3 plumbing contractors at that meeting. They were all in total agreement Not only because it is a safety issue, but it violates the warranties anytime you put a water heater in and you don't have an expansion tank.
Yeah.
And then we expanded the conversation to talk about what we call pressure reducing valves, which in the majority of structures in Leavenworth would require a pressure reducing valve. The code only allows a maximum water pressure of 80 PSI. Leavenworth has significantly higher water pressure in the majority of the city. I mean, I can tell you City Hall's at 130 PSI. And the reason that's there is because, you know, fixtures and faucets and stuff are not constructed to hold up to those kinds of pressure. So, in speaking with the Plumbing Board of Appeals, all three of them said if we go in and put a new water heater in, we're putting an expansion tank on. And we're also putting a pressure reducing valve, whether if the house doesn't have one, because that again is a safety issue and another void of the warranty of the water heater. So staff is all on board with that, and we want to address this issue now, moving forward.
Sounds good.
And the last code, swimming pool and spa code. This is a new code for the city of Leavenworth. It deals with commercial as well as residential situations. It deals with in-ground pools and it has other requirements for above-ground pools, as simply as, you know, you don't always have to have a barrier if you have the right type of ladder for your above-ground pool. Well, I do point out that the city of Leavenworth did, for years, just deleted the requirements for barriers around pools. When we adopted the 06 codes, we brought those requirements back in, because as you guys have mentioned this evening, insurance companies do not like to see
Right.
swimming pools without some type of fence around them.
Right.
Now, this code also deals with spas and items like that. It's nothing new to us, but again, it's just a completely separate document that we feel we have to put in place.
Does a pool in a backyard with a fenced backyard meet the requirements?
It's a little bit of a stretch, to be honest with you, to meet the code requirements, but there's an existing fence in place. We do allow that.
How tall does it have to be?
The code says 48. We've allowed 42.
Okay.
I mean, we want to see some attempt. We're not going to expect everyone to, you know, and I think Julie mentioned the depth. Unless it's changed, because I have not spent a lot of time in swimming pool and spa code, it's not my highest priority. But anytime the depth of the water is more than 24 inches, then all these requirements come into place.
Wow. Okay.
And we work with the citizens as well as we can on these issues. If someone comes in for a swimming pool permit right now, part of the requirement to get the swimming pool permit is that if you don't have a fence, you have to get a fence permit from community development at the same time.
Okay.
What's the name of your division that you head up, Mr. Burdette?
Building inspections.
And you have a few inspectors working for
I
you?
have 2 field inspectors and then 1 clerk.
And they work based on permits that are required for new construction and existing remodels and things like that?
Yes. We issue building, electrical, mechanical, and plumbing permits.
And I know that people, developers building new homes and new residences know what the regulation is, but for somebody doing like major renovation on a bathroom or something like that, they should know to call the city to, or the people working for them probably would be able to do that, right? Is that how it works?
Yes.
Okay.
And I think I've always prided myself and the staff that I have that we love answering questions. We would much rather answer your questions before you get started than come in and tell you you've done something wrong after the fact.
Right.
Because one of my inspectors, when I interviewed him, he was already the best qualified one before we even got to the interview process, but he won me over when he said, I don't consider myself an enforcement agent, I consider myself an educator. And that is the philosophy we've always wanted to have here in Leavenworth.
Good.
Do you need permits for an in-ground sprinkler system? Do you need a
You
permit?
do not need a permit for the sprinkler system, but you would need a permit for backflow prevention so that you don't contaminate
That's why
potable
I
water
asked,
within the
I
house.
heard you mention that, yes.
Right away.
Oh, yeah.
And if you're off your property toward the curb, there needs to be
A waiver.
a waiver.
Okay.
So when we put a signpost in your sprinkler system, it's not the city's fault.
Try and keep them out of the right of way, but it doesn't work,
Sure.
does it?
Okay, thank you.
Just want to be a renter now.
Yeah, really.
Good rundown.
Appreciate it, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So, quick question, Mr. Kramer. After all these three sets of codes, when do we be brought back for us to vote on? When? Are some of them immediate, like next week, or some of them?
No, it will not be next week.
Oh, okay.
I won't answer for Mr. Kramer.
You asked the
And
wrong
why not?
person.
What are we looking at, a couple months, probably?
We would hope to start bringing these back maybe the later part of January, maybe first part of February.
Okay,
So I gotta get with each of the departments, we gotta look at it, we gotta
Understand.
write the ordinance, and so depending on, some of them might be a little bit more detail we have to go into, so.
So not next week.
Yeah, not next week.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Good rundown.
Appreciate it, thank you.
Do we need to do a consensus or something?
I think along the way, there was.
Yeah.
Okay, okay.
Yeah. Next item on the agenda, Thornton Street project update.
Mr. Mayor, Commission, I just wanted to let Public Works give you a quick update and the public a quick update on what's going on Thornton Street. A lot of work's going on, but I think people have learned to stay away from it, so we don't get a lot of traffic anymore. So kind of share a little bit about what's going on. It's a big project, just briefly. So, Mike?
Yeah, as Paul said tonight, we wanted to give you a bit of an update on it. The original notice.
Mike, will you bring that microphone over?
Yes.
The original notice to proceed was issued there in kind of early October. The contractor got started installing some inlets and storm drain pipe, while one of the utility companies was doing a relocate that they needed to do there at Fifth Avenue and Thornton Street. During that relocation, that utility contractor realized that once they got it relocated, they were gonna have about 1,300 hours of tying it back in.
Wow.
Which basically stopped our part of the project for about 3 weeks. Originally put them behind some. They've since caught up to where they could actually start tearing the roadway out. And this is kind of what it looked like after they got the old pavement and curbs and everything out of there.
Looks like the 1800s, doesn't it?
Yeah,
What direction?
Yeah.
Are we looking south here on Fifth Avenue right there?
Down toward
First
Second
picture.
Avenue.
that's actually
Down-
to the east
down?
towards Second Avenue.
Toward Second Avenue.
Okay, that's
Down there.
Thornton looking east.
Yeah, we're
Okay.
standing at the west end of what's tore out looking east towards Second Avenue.
Okay.
See that little house that's
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes, that's better.
Oh, with the little jog there.
Yeah.
Yeah, Anthony's school is over on the right,
Yeah.
behind the trees, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, the old service station, everything's right there on the
Right.
right-hand side of the picture.
Yep.
It was the laundromat once and.
Yeah.
Right there?
service station. Yeah,
Yeah.
now it's a duplex.
Yeah.
Oh, really?
Change in use.
Let's see.
Maybe have to make it a little smaller.
Well, that picture's from a couple months ago, at least 6 weeks ago. I believe.
Yeah, about 6 weeks ago.
It's good to-
Do we have a new picture?
Oh, yeah, he's kind of working his way there.
All right, magic,
We should be able to.
right arrow.
After we got some of the dirt work and everything done, we did put down a geogrid and place some AB3 on top of that. That's kind of what our subgrade looks like. That's kind of a blurry picture, but that's pretty much what it looked like after all of the AB3 was put down and they got ready to start rolling it for compaction on it.
That's cool.
You can see the new inlets and everything in there that.
Yeah.
So,
You can start to see here the hill, the sight line, the dramatic improvement of the sight line. If you look at the machinery there on the left side, you'll see that the ground is 3 feet above that. That's how much of the hillside they cut into there.
Yeah.
You see the,
we cut
there's
out about 4 feet on that little hump as you go across Thornton
yeah.
Street there at Fifth Avenue.
Really flatten that out.
So this will be ready by next week, huh?
Update coming.
Yeah. is smaller still.
I need me to help you out.
Okay,
I think you have to then click off to
Okay,
the
guys.
side there.
New software.
and that, on November the 26th, we got our first layer of asphalt. Or actually, it was November the 23rd, we got our first layer of asphalt.
Oh, wow, yeah.
And about 3 days later than that, on the 26th, we got the curbs installed. The contractor is currently working on filling in behind the curbs, grading for the new sidewalk and everything that's going in there.
That would be great.
And the current schedule for laying the next lift of asphalt is Thursday of this week. Once that's done, they'll do some temporary striping through the intersection, everything, to identify the lanes, and there's a turn lane that's there at Thornton, or at Maple as well as Fifth Avenue. They anticipate opening up the intersection, would be next Monday, the 9th. And the afternoon or that next day, they will actually shut down everything west or east of Fourth Avenue, clear to Fifth Street, as well as the Second Avenue intersection.
Okay.
And they will start constructing on the big storm box that goes across Second Avenue and across Thornton Street in that location. During the winter months, they'll be working on storm drainage,
Oh,
inlets,
because that
piping.
big creek is right there.
Yeah, and it's gonna take, probably 2.5 months to install that new storm box that goes across Second Avenue as well, and Thornton as well. So they're counting on that being a winter project and hoping we're gonna have a good winter to keep going.
Is there an old storm box there now?
There is old storm box in there now and some old storm piping. We ran cameras and stuff through that and realized it wasn't in real good shape,
Right.
so we thought
Good.
it's best to
Good
go ahead
time
and
to do it.
replace that, yeah.
Right?
So the first pour of asphalt was 4 inches.
First,
They'll
first,
do,
yeah, first lay of asphalt was 4 inches. They're gonna lay another, layer of asphalt that'll be 4 inches. There's another 2 inches that will go on it, but they're gonna hold off on doing that until the rest of the project has a full 8 inches on it, so they can get a nice new smooth surface over the entire project.
Sounds good. And which company's doing the work?
Kissick Construction is doing the work.
Are they out of Kansas City or?
They're out of,
It's okay if you don't know, I just wondered.
it's basically Lee
Lee
Summit,
Summit.
Missouri.
And we have a Finnis doing quality control,
We have
quality
a
assurance?
Finnis out there doing our inspection work. We're providing some additional inspection work and everything with them too, so.
Everything seemed like it's going okay. I mean, I know
It is.
nothing's perfect, but
We've had some hiccups
Yeah.
with the subgrade on it. We did some borings and everything. All the borings said the soil was really good. Once we got to laying the rock and everything on there, we found out it's not quite like Jello, but if you do Jello and it gets a kind of that hard surface on top of it, but if you push on it, it kind of rolls. That's what the soil was doing. It was really unique stuff. We thought it was, well, it is wet, but we dug a couple test holes and it wasn't seeping any water. So, it required a little bit of digging some extra soil and stuff out, putting some more rock and everything in there to stabilize it a little bit. It still rolls, but it was stable enough to go ahead and put the asphalt on.
But you were able to find that through the process of the quality assurance, quality
Yeah.
control. Good. The curbs are curbs, I understand that, but the horizontal piece that kind of ties into the road, is that called the gutter?
Yeah, valley gutter, yeah.
That-
There's a gutter right along the
Yeah.
edge of the curb,
Yeah,
yes.
Okay,
Curbs are the
Yeah,
vertical
right,
part,
right.
Yeah.
there's the
okay, just
2
wanted to.
feet out.
Yeah.
Mr. Hooper, you said that the first layer of asphalt went down on the 23rd.
Yes.
So they're working weekends? That was Saturday.
They did do that on a Saturday, yes.
Okay. And can you review again where we can drive starting December 9th, approximately?
You'll be able to come down Maple Street,
You go north?
going north on Maple Street, you'll be able to turn right onto Thornton Street, go to Fifth Avenue and take a left-hand turn.
Okay,
So-
but you will not be able to go down Thornton down to Second Avenue
No.
or anything? Okay. And can you come down Thornton east of Broadway?
east of.
If I come to the end of Broadway, going south, and then I turn left, turn east.
Yeah.
Can I,
Yeah, you'll be able to come down Thornton.
okay, so Thornton will be
Yeah.
open all the way to Fifth Avenue or Maple?
Yeah, right now, the current plan too is to open up Fourth Avenue there by the school, so that will allow some different
Okay,
access.
so go all the way down to Fourth Avenue?
Yeah.
Okay,
And we are coordinating with the school, keep them informed of these changes.
okay.
Good.
Looks good.
And how the residents in the area, I'm sure they've had a few hiccups or a few
Couple
issues, but
hiccups,
been able
no
to work it
major
out?
complaints. We've worked out all the issues and everything with the property owners and
Yeah.
stuff.
Good. I know the project is big and needed to be done.
Right.
Total completion, maybe next June? Is that,
Probably more closer to next August.
okay?
Because it goes all the way out to Fourth Street, doesn't it? Or does it
No,
stop
no,
at
it
Fifth?
stops at
Fifth.
top of the hill there at Fifth.
Okay.
It does go clear to 10th on the west.
Right.
That's good.
Move on.
Okay,
Good rundown.
appreciate it.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Yeah, one more. Yep,
Local contractor doing the
they're doing concrete sidewalk. Yeah, and that was taken earlier today.
Okay.
That's good.
Okay.
Yep, appreciate the update, thank you. Next item on the agenda, 3 Mile Creek Clean Community Program Overview.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor and Commission, I just wanted to kind of tie a bow on this first year of this program, the 3 Mile Creek Cleanup Program. This was a program approved by the commission to use some transient guest tax funding to also fund local nonprofit groups in cleaning up the 3 Mile Creek Trail. We learned a lot about 3 Mile Creek and the trash that goes in there. I think a lot of people believe that it's thrown by people who walk on the trail or drive over the trail. A lot of it is the drainage basin. It comes through the inlets, comes through everything that goes through 3 Mile Creek. So we started in May. Just real quickly, in May was the Go Team Youth from the Faith Evangelistic Center. Did a very good job cleaning the creek. June, we had the Leavenworth Masonic Building Association that came in. July, Household of Faith Church did a cleanup. August, we had the Military Police Regimental Association, the Old West chapter, who came in and got quite a bit, about 24 bags of trash. September, we had the People of Color organization from Leavenworth High School came in and did the cleanup. October, Leavenworth Alumni Chapter of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority did the cleanup for the city. And then in November, the Book Club and Chess Club from Leavenworth High School teamed up to do the program. We did stop it in for December just because, you start getting into icy conditions and it starts getting a little dangerous down there. We fully intend, if the commission so decides, to continue it again.
I think it's
I
great.
think the organizations had a good time. They all did a good job. We did inspect after each one. I think it helped our parks crews a lot. They pulled tires out, they pulled a golf bag out, and then just a lot of trash that they cleaned up off that trail.
That's cool.
And each time a group did it, the city made a $500 donation to their organization, which helped a lot of those local organizations out. And frankly, we had more groups than we had months. So the thing that delays the opening a little bit sometimes is the flood condition. I expect that to happen again next year. We're still in a flood state, which this time of year is really unprecedented to still have the Missouri River in a flood state. So if that happens, and then maybe as we move into the new year, if we maybe want to look at expanding the idea, we could change stuff around or other areas or other ideas. But I think it was a way that we engaged the community and a lot of these groups to really get involved. So I thought it was a good program, and
Yes.
we'd like to keep going. If
When do you expect it to start, the next cleanup to be then?
we'd like to start it in March, and that's
Yeah.
when we were hoping to start
Makes
it
sense.
last year. But the water had backed up, so
Right.
that would be the plan,
So it
is
all depends.
to start lining them up
we just don't want a group to be signed in March and not get to do it, and somebody already signed up. So Charity Fry from my office does a great job coordinating that and running that program, so she's done a really good job. So.
Well, I definitely want to commend you. I think it was very creative and
Yes.
beneficial for the city as well as those nonprofits. So, good idea.
When they get finished doing their, you know, their thing, these groups, does somebody go out from our city just to kind of check that they've done what's necessary as far as the cleanup?
Yeah, we have a pretty, for a volunteer group like this, a form they have to fill out, and then there's a checklist, and we do meet with them, and we go look, you know, and before we make any kind of payment, so, we do make
That's
sure
very cool.
they've done the work, and they always, we ask that they do submit, you know, a picture or two, but they usually submit a lot of pictures.
That's all.
of things
Yeah.
they've
You shared a couple.
and have a
That's
good
good.
time.
That is
So, I think they enjoy giving back.
Your group, whatever group it was, you have the month of April, are they given a month?
Yeah, and they have to do it within, I believe it's the 10th to 20th, and the reason we do that is so you don't have a group do it the last day of a month and then a group do it the first day of the next month.
Makes sense.
So we try to get them kind of to do it in the middle of the month. and
So
we
they do,
assign-
they do one pass?
Yeah,
One-
1 month, they get,
One.
in the areas that they have to do it from the river out, I think, to Broadway.
So
I
they,
can't
yeah,
remember.
they start between the 10th and 20th or something, they will start at 1 and go all the way
Yep.
down. If there's, you know, with all the junk, and especially with high water, there's more stuff that comes down. Is there any wisdom into, and we have enough volunteers, do it in 2-week segments rather than 1-month segments? Or, you know, or something
Yeah.
like that, I don't know. If
Yeah,
there's-
sometimes you're right. Sometimes a week later, there was a lot of trash back in there. Sometimes it held for a while. It kind
Yeah.
of depends on rainfall, wind, I mean,
Yeah, it
just
would
a lot of
depend a lot.
conditions.
Yeah.
It'd be hard to book them and change it, so that's great.
Well, I think it's a very innovative program that you, as the city manager, I think brought to the commission, earlier
Yeah,
this year, in
earlier,
2019. So I'm supportive of continuing it, and if there are other opportunities, you know, that you could come back and talk to the commission about. I was thinking 5 Mile Creek now. I know that doesn't have as much in terms of the stormwater, like entry points that would clog it up and everything, but it is a major creek running through the city, isn't it?
Yeah,
Yeah.
but this, you
5 Mile
wouldn't be able
Walk
to
area,
access it, there's no walkways.
Okay, I'm just suggesting
Yeah.
that there are other
Well,
things,
areas.
and there's some high-traffic intersections too that get a lot of trash and litter that might be good candidates for, you know, if we are going to expand the program. I'm not saying we are, but I'm saying maybe we just
Yeah.
consider it.
Look at.
Yeah.
Sounds good.
That's all I have.
Yep, appreciate it. Thank you. Last item on the agenda, presentation of state legislative agenda for 2020.
Let me pull this up. Mr. Mayor and Commission, every year, the City Commission traditionally adopts the Kansas League of Municipalities Statement of Municipal Policy. And what, the city is a member of the League of Kansas Municipalities, and they put together the issues that have traditionally come up, could come up, have come up in the past, and we look at those issues and gauge how they would affect the city. There's over 110 issues in everything from public safety to utilities to open transparency and outreach. So what I've done is on the policy report, I think I've selected sort of 9, some specific and some broad areas, just to watch for the year. We never know until we get into the legislative session what's gonna come up.
Right.
Whether there's gonna be an attack on home rule, whether there's gonna be bills dealing with city elections that we sort of have to jump into place. But for 2020, here are just some ideas or some things to keep an eye on through discussions I've had with the league and with some of our local elected state leaders. Internet sales tax collection. The state of Kansas still does not have state legislation requiring the collection of internet sales tax. We have seen an increase in voluntary compliance. I met with our finance director today to go over compensating use tax, which is internet sales tax revenue. And it does grow every year. It's growing at about 7.5%, which is a pretty good growth. So I think the businesses are seeing this coming. The model that we hear a lot is the South Dakota model, which they put it in place. Kansas has not done that yet. My understanding was there was a bill that had pretty widespread agreement, but it got bogged down in an omnibus tax bill, as these things tend to do. We would like for our legislators to pull that out and pass it separately. It's a win. I mean, it's only a win situation for
Yeah.
the state. It would put a limit on any businesses that do $100,000 or a number of transactions per year would be required to capture internet-based sales tax. is what we would like. But again, we still see a lot of internet sales tax revenue, but this would codify it within the state legislature.
Sure would.
Tax and spending lid. This is a remnant of what I would call the attack on home rule. This is the state legislature putting a property tax lid on local governments. The city of Leavenworth hadn't increased their property taxes in 20 years. This takes the authority of the local elected officials from making taxing decisions. It presupposes some sort of, I think, sinister, sometimes maybe intent of endless tax increases, but we believe that there are measures in place, such as elections, to deal with that. And I think that the local governing body is the best determinant of what the funding structure should be.
Absolutely.
Property tax exemptions, there's theories you hear out there, or phrases you hear out there, the dark store theory, where businesses would be valued just for their physical structure, not for their use or not for their the interior contents of their building. This would simply shift the revenue out of property tax and decrease the revenue available to the city that would probably have to be shifted somewhere else. This hasn't got as much traction as it has in years past, but we continue to watch it. A couple years ago, health clubs were looking to exempt all of their interior. They wanted to be tax exempt, property tax exempt. So this is all about having a broad, diverse tax base. Public safety, the league did add mental health and mental health funding to the issue. This has been largely taken out of the state's realm, as we can see by the mental health task force that the county put together. All of the counties and cities are feeling this as the state has really cut back funding. I just saw, I think in the paper today, that they've increased salaries at Osawatomie and some other positions, and so I think they're trending in the right direction. But they made it one of their action items: support allocating additional resources for mental health programs. Funds should be allocated for community mental health centers, which I know we used to have more options, and additional bed space for patients with mental health issues. We've talked constantly about our officers, the stories that continue to today of our officers sitting with mental health patients for hours upon hours on end, because there's nowhere else to take them. There's no beds open. So we continue to ask the state to provide adequate funding for those opportunities. The next sort of focus area was in infrastructure. All transportation related items. I didn't want to pick one. They had the Connecting Links program, a T-Works program. I think focusing on planning, budgeting, and funding. When I started here, the state had a 10-year T-Works program, and they funded about 7 years of it. The Centennial Bridge study of $1.2 million was that, with the plan being the study was funded in the 2010 to 2020 T-Works program, with the construction then following in the 2020 to 2030. The T-Works program was ended because there was no transportation funding in the state. The reserves for KDOT were cut. Transportation funding was routed elsewhere. I think we're building back transportation funding, but we've seen some return of some state cost share projects. A lot of the projects that we've done over the last 10 years, 4th and Poplar, 4th and Marion, were all done through state cost share programs. And those safety and intersection programs, I think, are coming back a little bit, but we'll continue to push our legislators to do that. We are very happy and appreciative of KDOT and the work they've done, providing funding, matching funding for 4th and Eisenhower, the intersection of 4th and Eisenhower that the state has awarded the cities of Leavenworth and Lansing as co-applicants, $1.65 million as a cost share, and 8515 construction grant for that project. So we're seeing some come back, but we continue to ask the state to fund transportation initiatives. Another new one is water and wastewater certification. Without getting into the weeds too much, the league has put out that there's a 17% pass rate for higher level wastewater certification levels at the state. So at our wastewater treatment plant, we have two, what they're deemed as level 4 operators, and we're required to have a level 4 operator based on the size and scope of our plant. Of course, then you want level 3s who can then become level 4s or fill positions in level 2s. The success rate of those tests are down to 17%. The league's stance is if a professor had a 17% pass rate for their test, it's most likely something wrong with their test. So we're not asking to lower the standards, we're looking to them to reevaluate how they test.
Certifications.
So that we can continue. It is extremely challenging to keep wastewater treatment employees and ones that have reached level 2, 3, and 4. The other part of that is a level 4 operator cannot essentially work at another plant while they're working. The example would be if we lost our level 4, if Lansing had one, they couldn't come over and sort of on a short-term basis, 2 or 3 days a week. But in smaller communities, western part of the state and even in this part of the state, they're looking to get some sort of program in place where you could partner with another organization and sort of use their umbrella certification to keep the plant running and be in compliance. So some more flexibility from KDHE on wastewater treatment certifications and testing. The last 3, in the government policies and procedures sections, all issues related to local elections, including filing for office. So the new one here, besides moving the city elections, which the state decided to do a couple years ago, was when they made those changes, they only allowed local, if you're running for city commission, you have to file at the county.
Right.
Here it's easy to do. It's right down the street. In the entire western 2/3 of the state, there are many cities where it's hours away to get to the county to file. And so they believe that it's hurting candidate turnout for people to have to go to the county seat from small cities. The league is asking that they return that to filing at City Hall, at your city for office. That's where you run. That's where everything else is done.
Makes sense.
For us, again, not a big action item, it's down the street, but we believe that returning that back to the city is probably the most appropriate. I don't believe that there's any kind of momentum on changing any of the city elections, any of the city election times. They made the provision this year where you could seat new commissioners earlier, which we took advantage of, but I don't see any big movement in that way. Public property and right-of-way, this is when the state got involved a couple years ago, telling candidates that they could put their campaign signs in the public right-of-way. There's reasons that the city regulates right-of-way. It's for safety, it's for appearance. There are plenty of options for that, but again, it's the erosion of home control that you're not able to control what goes in your right-of-way. And then final thing on housing and rental inspections. Let me pull that one back up. 15 through 18. Allowing more flexibility for the city to regulate and work on issues dealing with housing and rental inspections, which the state has taken some action on recently. So that's it. Again, there's nothing on here there's nothing that my list of action items precludes. We'll just have to see how the session plays out. And again, as we've done the last couple of years, if anything pops up, I'll bring that to the commission to look for direction on weighing in with our legislators. That's all I had.
Thanks, Mr. Paul.
Comment I have, and you've heard me say it before, moving the city and school board elections from first week in April to November, I think is absolutely ludicrous. I think it is a misinformed decision the state made. One of their arguments is, well, that's when we run, state legislature runs, yeah, but they don't even work from the 1st of June until election day in November. Here we have city elections. If a person decides not to run, example, Commissioner Dedeke did not file by the June 1st deadline, whatever the June deadline was, and he is in effect a lame duck until December 10th. Commissioner Dedeke, obviously, enough of a professional, he's always here, he does his job. But that is not right for the city's state. And I know the faction that pushed this through had an ulterior motive, that their next thing was to make it partisan elections. That didn't happen. That faction probably has died off, but I sure would push for trying to get it back to the April elections. If there's a primary with, you can file during the month of January, usually like the 25th of January or so, that filing was ended. If it required a primary, there was a primary in February, and then the general election was first Tuesday in April, and the new commission took their seat the following Tuesday. Plenty of time for anyone that's wanting to run, to learn, come to the commission meetings, meet with city manager, city clerk, et cetera. This is just a violation, in my opinion. And I will say it to any legislator that is willing to listen, that probably there's no impetus for them to take it any further. But it's wrong. I've said my piece.
Thank you, appreciate it. Commissioner Batter, you have anything?
Yes, I do. Over the past year, Mary Dwyer's been working, gathering a lot of information in regard to transit in Leavenworth. And I would like to see if maybe she could bring some of that information and I could assist with that as well. I mean, we've both been going to other communities. We've been getting information from other stakeholders in the community and other transportation systems. For example, I was in Kansas City, Kansas today, where they were doing a project on a 10 square mile area, which was about the size of Leavenworth, and of a track around Leavenworth, and got some really good information. And I wondered if it would be possible to put it on a future study session that we could discuss. And
Transportation update?
Yeah.
yes,
That'd be awesome.
that'd be awesome. Thank you.
Commissioner Priceinger, Commissioner Griswold?
No.
All right, Paul?
Just to continue, a reminder that we do still have 2 more commission meetings. Next week, we'll have the new commissioner and re-elected commissioner sworn in, and then we'll also have a meeting on the 17th, so we still have a lot of stuff to get done.
Now, will we decide on the comprehensive plan before the new commissioners start, or?
That will be on the agenda for the 10th, but it will be after the change, after the
After the
swearing,
change,
and the new
okay.
commission will then vote on the new
So
business.
the new commissioners will be getting this information as well, right?
Yeah, they have the links.
Good,
Yeah, and actually hard copy too.
okay.
And I have nothing. No? Have a great week. Meeting adjourned.
Thank you.